So the purpose of the panel is to kind of hear from the people who are insiders in the open source projects and kind of get their perspective of what's going on and how do they see things evolving. Just a second. Make it more visual. It's the same information. But I will let each panelist say a few words about themselves, and maybe we'll just start by having each one of you tell us kind of what brought you to this place, like what was your journey that brought you to be involved in open source, and a few words about what you're currently doing in open source networking. So, Lingli, if you want to start.
Okay, I'll go first. My name is Lingli Deng. I work for China Mobile Research Institute, and I have a long history with this community. Actually, goes back like nearly 10 years ago when I was working with a single vendor, developing the China's first virtualized data plan network elements. And sooner or later, I realized that working with a single vendor will actually result in vendor lock-in, and open source would actually solve the problem for us. So that is why I joined OPNV by that time and initiate DPAC. That was an open architecture defined for acceleration technologies that could be leveraged among different network element set, which was get later adopted by OpenStack and also Linux kernel, supported. And that's like opened up a new frontier for myself. And I'm so happy that I stayed here and to work, a lot of like new technologies invented along the way.
Hello, my name is Olaf Renner. I work for Nokia in Nokia's open source program office. And I started to work in open source networking after I had been involved for a couple of years in the standardization in ETSI NFV. And from there on, a lot of activities happened in OpenStack, leveraging OpenStack, and also in the field of software-defined networking. So I started to get involved with Open Daylight, and later on, of course, also in OPNFV to build kind of a complete platform for that.
Hi, my name is Ciaran Johnston. I'm a senior expert in OSS and network architecture in Ericsson. I guess my ventures into open source started when I went to university and worked on a concept called a Beowulf cluster. I don't know if anybody remembers that from the 90s, but it was the precursor to Kubernetes and Linux and all that good stuff. Obviously based on Linux. From there, joining Ericsson, done a lot of software development on various different projects, and we leverage a lot of open source through that. But in particular, building applications that can run on top of platforms like Kubernetes and OpenStack before that. It was probably 2018 or thereabouts I got involved in ONAP, and that was really, I was very happy to get involved in open source because I've always seen the value of it. I've always seen the benefits that it can bring to our community and the broader industry. And since then, I'm now representing Ericsson on the technical steering committee for Nefio, and I'm really enjoying working with that community to try and build a automation framework for cloud-native applications and cloud-native networking workloads on top of Kubernetes.
Yeah, thanks. So it sounds like each one of you have found the light at some point of their career and never turned back and started doing open source, which is, again, my personal experience as well. Like once you start open source, it's very hard to go back. So my next question is about kind of the current state of open source networking as you see it, and what do you see as, there's a lot of talk in the vision of open source networking talks a lot about autonomous networks and intent-based networking. So where do you think we are on that journey in the open source world? Are we there yet? Is it all done, some of it? So what do you think? Maybe Ciaran, go the opposite direction.
Give me the easy one now to start. So, so I mean, first of all, it really depends on what you mean by your definition of the word autonomous. And I mean, autonomous really means that you can give the network or give the management system of the network some goals to try and achieve, and then the network will sort of autonomously reach those goals and be able to adapt to unforeseen situations that arise in the network. Now, I did raise the point, I was going to make the comment that autonomous or truly autonomous networks would be impossible to achieve, but I was warned against saying that because, you know, certainly we're aiming for that. But it is going to be very, very difficult to get full autonomy, but I think this journey towards that, I think, is very important. And we saw it today, like the Timo Deutsche Telekom presentation earlier on, where they're endeavoring towards building open source components and bringing them together to achieve that architecture is a really good example of that. I think the aspect of autonomy that's important for me is that we can sort of horizontalize the architecture and make sure that we put the autonomous tools and capabilities into the right parts of the network so that you can optimize in the right places. And I think we've seen open source frameworks, Kubernetes, OpenStack before that, Nephew then building on top of that, providing tools and frameworks to automate a lot of those processes helps with that. And then of course AI is a very important building block in order to deal with that unpredictability, to deal with the variability in the networks, and to sort of learn from and adapt as we go.
Yeah, I can pretty much just agree to what has been said so far. And I think this journey will continue. So I think it won't be really a hard break. So the kind of level of how we can automate things, it has been started to be explored now. I think it can, some of the concepts that, for example, Kubernetes offers are still not fully kind of explored, so there's still a lot of potential in it. And of course, there will be now also AI coming to the bill, which will enable us to even interact differently with such a system. So if you think of having kind of controllers setting your intent, and then the system is kind of reconfiguring through the control mechanism. This will be now even enhanced through AI, but that could also mean that the interfaces kind of change. So it might move away a bit from the pure API-based approach, and I guess we will see also a different kind of implementation of these controllers. So those could be agents, for example. So I think there will be a lot of changes still coming.
I couldn't agree more with you two guys. So, and for China Mobile, we actually set this corporate level strategic goal, as Dr. Feng mentioned earlier, in the more, that we would like to actually achieve level 4 autonomous network by 2025. And I think since 2021, when we, announced this goal, we have made substantial progress. We were less than level 2 by that time, and now we're nearly, level, I think is 3.8 by the end of last year. And the goal still is very aggressive for us to reach level 4 by 2025. I would say we're still in the early premature phase for level 4, because as we understand, level 4 means that we have to leverage some kind of like autonomy in decision making. 2 years ago, we launched an open source initiative in ONAP when we're extending UUI component to actually be able to interpret natural language input intent into actionable policies that could be executed by ONAP closed loop. And the same idea could also be, realized with Nephew now, I believe. But, how to move from there to actually what we would see autonomous decision-making is a large, step. But with large language models coming up, we see that it's actually, in some cases, it is now implementable and viable. For example, in Dr. Feng's speech, she mentioned a very pioneering applications that we are actually leveraging not only large language models, but also structured data large models that we trained from our network so that it can actually make decisions in real time to do optimal array access network issue dealing. And that marks also, I think, a big step. And if we can actually scale that kind of like use cases with agent platforms, then we can replicate this kind of like experience with other types of network OAM and scenarios. And that would gives us, I think, a big help when we're trying to achieve level 4 autonomous network. And you can see that there is like an open source part first, and then we replicate it, verify it in production network, and try to scale it with our platform. And that is what we call as open source first, standardization next, and then scale adoption at last.
Yeah. So it sounds like the open source projects are already providing some level of autonomous networks, and maybe they're even starting to see commercial things, but still there's a lot to do. And I think your job security in the open source world is safe. No need to worry. The work is far from being done. And you all kind of alluded to the use of AI and how it's going to be deployed. And so I was wondering if you have some examples of how AI is already being used or helping open source networking projects, whether it's code generation, documentation generation, embedding of AI algorithms, or anything where you can share that, where you see AI actually starting to affect open source projects. So I don't know who wants to go first or who has any example.
Yeah, I think we had already a couple of sessions on this, even on previous conferences, where we could peek into what is already being applied. In Nephew, for example, we had a couple of interesting sessions how we could use large language models to have this kind of a language interface to do configuration, for example. Also, another typical use case is to kind of scrape your system logs and do the analysis on that. So that greatly improves the kind of simplicity, and especially for humans, it gets much easier. And you don't even have to cope with a lot of complex interfaces for that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Any other examples?
Yeah, I think we had a demo recently from Orange at the Nephew TSC a couple of weeks ago, where they demonstrated their telco AI platform as well, integrating into Nephew, which kind of showcased that large language model approach to interpreting user input and then converting that into commands that can then be executed to roll out clusters and deploy workloads and so on. So I think those types of use cases are showing there's a lot of interest in that. I think one of the important areas that open source is enabling AI to become successful is by enabling the frameworks to be developed and the tools and capabilities for getting the AI to the network, getting the data to the AI, and sort of providing the enablers for that innovation to give the kind of the environment in which we can innovate and we can learn and we can try these new things out, because it's so much easier now than it was even a few years ago to kind of get up and running with this type of thing, and a lot of that is due to work that happens in open source.
I would only like to add a little bit on this, is that I don't think that we are short of like use cases or, like illustrations of the role that large language models or type of technology that could help open source. But from our experience, it's really, important for us to move from open source to production is actually to strike a trade-off when you find the right use case to replicate in your production. And it's important for us to understand, what will be the margin cost when you are trying to deploy that into production. So in that case, we need type of like standardization, and then we can support various use cases on top of like a common architecture. That is actually the key to reduce that margin cost when you're trying to enable any use case specific applications, because we as service operators, we operate in different geographic areas, and we are actually hosting a diverse types of services that we offer to our customers. And we are also trying to evolve ourselves into new types of information servicing. So we all have those dynamics, and open source actually, could acting, even for a platform for us to try different use cases. And we fail fast when we are doing open source innovations, and that would also help us to target rightfully when we are trying to replicate that into production.
I may also want to add another point. So when we talk about AI and open source, what we also see is that, of course, AI, large language models, are used to create code, but also to kind of create pull requests, issues, vulnerability reports. So what I also see is that this adds additional pressure on some of the maintainers, because they have to cope with AI-generated content. And that is also something that is new, and at some point we need to handle also that. So it's not just the network that integrates AI, but everyone else is using AI outside and for the open source development, and not always in a positive way.
Yeah, so it's interesting that AI is not just an opportunity, but also a challenge. And that would maybe bring me to the last questions for this panel. If you can say a few words about what you see coming up for open source networking, and include the challenges that you see. And since it's the last question, if you have a call for action for the audience, feel free to include that as well. So.
I think just to add to your point there a minute ago, I think as well, I mean, even when we talk about sort of using large language models as a way to interact with systems, that's a new innovative way to get vulnerabilities and to be exposed to vulnerabilities. So I think one of the things, so we have the tension between secure networks and easy to manage and easy to automate networks, and we do need to push for a zero trust architecture. So I think the security aspect is extremely important. But I think more generally, I mean, why are we doing this? We're doing this to make better services for customers. We're doing it to get them rolled out quicker. We're doing it to make much more robust, resilient, and performant networks, and also to reduce energy consumption and save the planet and all that sort of stuff. And I think, we see use cases like non-terrestrial networks and so on coming, where the networks are going to get even more complex. The ways in which we're interacting, or the ways in which the components of the network interact with each other. You've got Kubernetes platforms on top of different hardware from different vendors, et cetera, et cetera. So there's so many moving parts. Building an autonomous system to manage that is the only way really that we can be successful here, because it's not something that we can hope to continue to use traditional methods for sort of management and automation.
Yeah, and I think to handle all that, collaboration will be key. So I think we heard about a couple of communities that are interesting and already identified some of the use cases. So AI-RAN Alliance would be one of those collaborations that promise a lot of overlap, especially as they also explore some of the use cases. And if you can get a kind of direct connection to the open source community, I think this could speed up even more some of the development of these use cases, exploration on that, and kind of harmonizing how we think this could all work on the way to autonomous networks. And yeah, otherwise, I think it won't be just about AI. As said before, I think the kind of cloud journey will continue. Cloud technologies will stay important. And you can see that, for example, in the Kubernetes community, there are now a lot of activities that try to handle these AI workloads, and for especially also how do you attach devices for the acceleration to your pods. And that spins out even to the network. So how do you connect your pods to a network that is for sure not just a default network that can handle these use cases? So we will see a lot more use cases still in the kind of classic cloud-native development, I think.
Right. I think Randy's question talks about, the future change and then the recommendations for the community. So take the first part, I would say, I would echo what Dr. Deng has already put forward, is that agentic AI was what we're now looking at. It is really a hot topic, and not only within our industry. It is kind of like a buzzword for the entire world. But in this industry, what does agentic AI means? I just write down this, definition. Agentic AI means autonomous self-optimization AI systems. So sounds very familiar, right? When we are recalling the strategic goal for level 4 or even fully autonomous networks, that is what we need actually to realize our vision for higher autonomous network. So leveraging agentic AI in network, I think would be, the future change that we see. And for the recommendation list, believe me, I wasn't cheating. And those kind of like AI agent frameworks and also responsible AI frameworks was on my recommendation list until, RPEG bring forward those splendid contribution plans from Emphasis. So we are so thrilled to see that we have, a more mature framework for domain-specific AI within this community. And what we could only hope is that we would be very much participating in these efforts and see, how long it will take for us to actually build one of our first super blueprint for an end-to-end autonomous agentic AI network system. So I'm very much looking forward to that. That would be my final recommendation.
Yeah. Thank you very much. There are so many other questions I wanted to ask, but I'm getting signals that our time is up. So I want to thank you for the panel, but most of all, thank you for the great work you and the rest of the community are doing in building all this wonderful technology. Still a lot is ahead of us, so keep up the good work, and hopefully the community will just keep growing. Thank you very much.